Welcome to the Simply Be Found Huddle with Dean and Rob, and we have today Chris Hood as one of our guests. Chris, I'll let you go ahead and start off today and tell everybody about you and what it is you do and how they can find you for one, so that way we don't forget to do that.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Chris Hood. I am a strategist by trade, which covers a wide variety of things, but I also teach. I'm an author. I'm a strategist. I do a lot of public speaking, a writer, author. I have a couple of companies across multiple different industries, and you can find me if you want to learn more at chrishood.com, CHRISHOOD.com.
Ah,
Well,
awesome. It sounds like you're a busy person there, Chris. So you got a lot of things going on, like everybody in industry that likes to be entrepreneurial spirit kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I decided a long time ago I wasn't going to ever do one thing ever again. I just didn't want to get trapped into, well, now what do I do?
well,
Exactly.
was that a good decision or was that a bad decision or is it a day by day thing?
It's sometimes it is a day by day thing, but I actually love it. It keeps me kind of engaged. It keeps me fluid. As we've seen in the past, especially we'll call out COVID. We can be disrupted at any moment of our lives, and so this way, if one thing fails, I've got like another 10 things that are sitting there on the side that I can just pick up. So yeah, just kind of keeping things very agile and fluid has been very inspirational, even, and powerful for me, for sure.
So my thing I tell everybody is I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
I
Yeah.
still want to be a Toys R Us
it.
kid, but I was telling my kids that the other day, and they're like, "What's Toys R Us?"
Yeah. 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 No, I say that every day. Like, what did you do today? Well, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. I don't know.
Well, Dean and I've always joked, that we're just lead janitors. We clean up shit all day. It's all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But I call that, when you have multiple different pieces, I call that the hit by bust theory, because you never know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I think marketing falls into that. Anything in the business world falls into that, because I don't like the theories inside of business of, just taking shit and throwing it at the wall and hoping something sticks. But you also don't know, if you don't put it out there, you'll never know if it will stick. And I think there's a lot of marketers out there that are fearful of that. When we do our podcasts, when we do our videos, when we do our blogs, sometimes we'll just put stuff out just to see if something will go. And sometimes you'll get 0 views and it'll sit there for a month and a half. And next thing you know, it's starting to get views and you go, where'd that video come from? But you have to make sure that you're spreading yourself out, because you never know where you're going to open up or what door is going to come from any opportunity. So Chris, what kind of companies do you work with for each of your companies, since you have multiple? I noticed that you have, I think it's Infallible down inside of there for your .com. What company is that?
Well, I want to quickly jump back to the whole spaghetti thing.
Go for
it. There's a big difference between throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks versus throwing lasagna at the wall. And where I'm coming from in this is that oftentimes the spaghetti analogy is, I don't know what I'm throwing against the wall, versus being very purposeful about the things that you want to throw against the wall, because often in that you're going to find stuff that you enjoy. So for example, I've got a lot of things going on, but all of the things that I have going on are things that I enjoy. It's not like I'm saying, hey, let me try rocket science today and see what happens. I don't want to do that. So I'm not throwing that against the wall. So I think in your iteration process, by having a clearer idea of what you want to tackle as your option base, that's going to help you be a little bit more successful in that process. But in terms of the companies that I have going on, you mentioned Infallible. Actually, Infallible is my new book. It's a book about artificial intelligence and how it is reshaping consumer behaviors. And so infallible.com is just a direct link so that you can go and purchase the book if you'd like.
Oh, there you go.
So that's the Infallible. That's my book. I also have a video game company called Muddy Robot. And in that company, we are building video games, which is always fun. I'm also working with a new startup called Poly API, where I'm the chief marketing officer. And in that company, we are building AI powered integrations so that organizations can streamline how they connect systems together and build better customer experiences. I also have another AI company called Sensible, and that's also in the AI video gaming space, but it's about building emotionally intelligent artificial intelligence. And then, like I said, I also teach, and I have some other books that are out there, and public speaking, and all that other kind of fun
Gotcha.
stuff.
So let's talk about AI for just a second, Chris. You mentioned that. Let's kind of deep dive into where you think it's going to go. Is it? I mean, we use it all the time to assist us, but we're starting to see some people that depend on it exclusively. They're not really using the human factor on it. Where do you think? Let's kind of just talk. Since you just wrote that book and you've done a lot of research, where do you think it's going to go, and what's the best way for businesses to manage it responsibly and make sure the information went out there doesn't sound like all the other spaghetti hitting the wall kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting, speaking about it from a marketing perspective. I actually replied to somebody on LinkedIn and I said, if you're using AI as a marketer, you're not a marketer. Right? Because marketing requires some level of creativity that you can't achieve inside of artificial intelligence. I think what you are pointing out is what are some of the flaws that we tend to forget about as it relates to, things like ChatGPT or generative AI. Right now, if you read the very, very fine print, small print at the bottom of ChatGPT, it says the responses are not always correct, or something along those lines. And think about that. There are so many people. I call it now. We are living in the cut and paste, generation, because that's all we're doing. We're outputting, we're cutting, we're pasting it. We're not comprehending it. We're not validating it. We believe that it's infallible. This is where my book comes from. Because if our belief in AI is that it is always correct or that it couldn't possibly be wrong, then we're just cutting and pasting. And oftentimes, when we cut and paste the errors, the hallucinations, however you want to put it, then we are running the risk of, one, sounding like everybody else out there, two, coming across as unauthentic or even not creative, and three, potentially opening ourselves up to risk because we have posted something now that, like, imagine if you said, we've got a great campaign going on right now. It's fabulous. We've got this new product. Go and check it out. And if you use this code, you're going to get the product sent to you for free. And that goes out because somebody just cut and pasted. And then all of a sudden your CEO is calling you and saying, why are we giving out all these free things? Right. We kind of joke, but those things are happening, right? Where if you are posting promotional or things that are opening you up to risk, well, then you are now liable for whatever that marketing statement becomes. And so it is critical for people to understand that AI is not always correct. And two, including the human element into that process will help you be more creative, more authentic, more inspiring, and more accurate.
Well, there's a big piece to that. I mean, I've seen inside of the marketing world, I've seen where there's marketers that put it on autopilot and call it kind of basically a co-pilot type of thing, and it starts going out and doing all the blogging. I was looking at some of our competition for Simply Be Found, and we utilize the AI a ton, and it's made it to where we could do a lot more faster, but you have to have that human aspect to it. But I was looking at one of our competitors, and they put an AI piece that'll respond to reviews, and I'm like, oh, I would never trust AI to go through and respond to my reviews. For one, it's not going to have any emotion to it. For two, it has no idea what, someone complains, it has no idea what to even say back. AI is great. AI is a huge, great tool to be able to use, but trusting it just to go out there, that's like saying computers never make a mistake,
Yeah.
and that they never fail and that you never have tech problems. I mean, it's going to be all over the place.
Yeah, and we as consumers are starting to recognize what is human written and what is AI written. And
Yeah.
you might think like there's no way to tell. Like that's usually the number one argument is there's no way to tell. And I said, okay, well, you produce two different things, one through AI and one not, and send it to me, and I'll tell you which one is AI.
I
Because
can even go I can even go deeper into that. I'm getting to the point that I've seen so much of it. I can tell if it came from Claude, if it came from
yeah,
Chat GPT, or if it came from Gemini.
yeah, absolutely. I had a really interesting exchange with somebody in email because they sent me basically a canned automated, type of message. And I called them out on it. I said, and of course, these are all people who are trying to sell their AI automation tool. And I'm like, well, if your AI automation tool is this bad that I can tell that it's AI, then clearly it doesn't work. And clearly I wouldn't want to do business with you. And he responded as a real person then because he asked, he said, well, I'm curious, how did you know it was AI? And so I went through it like line by line, and showing him like how each one of these lines were an indication of artificial intelligence. And afterwards he said, wow, I never really looked at it this way. And I said, I've got to ask you, is this working for you? And his response was, no. Well, then why are you doing it? Like, this is the mind-blowing thing is it's not working because you've got zero return on this. You now have people calling you out because it seems and sounds and reads unauthentic, and yet you're still doing it because you think that there's some magic sauce that's one day going to materialize and it's just going to bring in a ton of business. It's not.
Well, you see it on that side. You also see it on the applicant side. So when you're doing job hiring, I was just going through a bunch of applicants and looking at it. For one, they forget to put things in what they're supposed to insert in. Obviously, you can't pay attention if you don't do that. And then they oversell themselves because they use, Chat GPT to do it. And when it comes to the real world and they have get their feet held to the fire, they can't do it. But I see that from all the marketing, a ton of marketing companies. I shouldn't say all and be an absolute, but I see it from a lot of them. And it's like they just put so much trust into it and you can't trust it that much. So when we do our reviews for profiles and everything inside of our system for the listings engine, one of the big pieces that we do is we say, this is partially AI driven because we take the data points, we run it through a system. You have to edit that information to make it you because you know your business better than we do. The AI probably knows your business better than we do, and it helps us be able to do it. But we still go through because I was asked the question of, well, why don't you just have a button to click it and just generate it right away inside of the system? I said, because we still look at it. We're probably going to miss some stuff as we look at it because we're not in your business every day. But we're still looking at it and making tweaks to what the AI came up with. It's not an instant turnaround of doing that. If you want that, then go to ChatGPT and ask yourself and just copy and paste because you live in a different world. And you're putting way too much trust in there. And your issue with AI is the fact that it just keeps regenerating the same stuff over and over. And all of a sudden you get to a point where there's nothing new. So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents on it. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, kind of working backwards, you have to understand that, all AI, all generative AI, and I've used this term in the past, and I started saying this about 2 years ago, and people even back then were getting overly frustrated with me. They still do. But anyway, I said you have to think about ChatGPT or generative AI as basically an overglorified search engine
And
because at
that's
the
all
end
it
of
is.
that's
It's
all
nothing
it
but an
is.
algorithm.
It's not creating new content. It's regurgitating old content. It's taking the content that it's already aware of and reformatting it into a different sequence and then outputting it into something that you want to use. But by default, it's not new. So even if we think about this from a marketing perspective and we say, hey, ChatGPT, come up with 10, new original ideas for some sort of marketing campaign. Well, all it's going to do is go out there and find other marketing campaigns that have done something similar and present that to you. It's incapable of creating an original idea that has never been done before.
And it doesn't know if that idea worked or if it didn't work.
That's correct, right? So out of these 10 ideas, like those, all 10 of them could be ideas that have been previously tried and they've all failed miserably, right? So, it goes back to what you're saying is that there's this trust, which I outline in my book. There's this belief system. It's an ideology around artificial intelligence that has basically clouded a lot of people's perception of what the true capabilities of AI is. And so as a result, there's this belief and this trust that, hey, if I put this in, I'm going to get original content and I'm going to be able to, have it without flaws, and I'm going to be able to cut and paste it and it's going to be miraculous and people are going to love me for it. And the reality is it just doesn't work that way. The AI is not even capable of doing the things that you believe it is capable of doing, which creates this false narrative, this ideology that is, again, completely changing how we are all doing business today.
So one thing, I'm going to jump in real quick, Rob.
Go for it, Dean. Sorry,
Chris. One of the things I've noticed, and I asked Rob yesterday, and in fact, it's kind of a good intro to this, is I'm starting to see AI start to pick up on other AI content, and it's starting to skew and move based on the amount of content that's being out there. That do you think that's a reality that can happen with everything's being published out there, that eventually it starts to skew because so much information is repeating itself? Do you feel that?
Yeah, there's an estimate out there right now that about 90% of all content on the internet now is generated by AI. Now, if you think about that and you're like, well, hold on, the internet has been around for a long time, and there's a lot of original content out there that predates AI. But the mass amounts of AI content being generated now has surpassed the original amount of data that we had before generative AI. And so, again, rough estimates is it's about 90% is AI generated. Now, if we put that in perspective, we will reach a point where AI is basically training on AI. And what we call that is degenerative AI. Right. That over time, as you continue to train AI based on its own output, you basically will degenerate the authenticity, well, not the authenticity, but the accuracy of that content. And if we keep circulating, looping this process, it will become progressively worse. And so even though we think that the output right now is pretty good, it's actually getting worse over time.
It is. And that's why a lot of these different AI systems are starting to go out and look at YouTube and look at for videos, because that's where they can pull real information that is not AI generated, except for the AI generated videos. So if you look at YouTube, you have to be able to say, hey, this was created by AI. It'll automatically skip over that. It's starting to look at transcripts of real things out there because it's having a hard time keeping the quality and going through and generating the same stuff off of there.
Yes.
So a big piece, and a big piece to that, and one thing I recommend, or we recommend, Dean, all the time, is start with a video. If you're going to use ChatGPT, of course, Siri wants to talk to me. AI, it works all the time. But you start with a video first, and then take that transcript, put it in, and then have it write some of the stuff off of it, because now you're using your own data points for it to do it, and you can then tweak it. It gives you a great starting point. What's your opinion on that, and how video ties into the whole AI piece for that aspect?
Yeah. So I was going to say yes, but big but. we have AI generated videos,
Right.
which most of us can see and recognize, but also you have to, there's two sides of this. One, so many people now are using AI to generate the script for
Yes.
what they are saying in the video. So even though it might be a real person reading a script, that script is AI generated, which then completes the circle. And also, think about it even more broadly. The three of us are having a conversation right now.
Right.
This conversation is unedited, and obviously, I'm not a robot reciting what I'm saying.
I'm
However,
sorry, I'm a robot. I'm just kidding.
however, a lot of what I am saying, I've repeated on other podcasts.
Right.
And so the natural instinction of, well, not everything is a copy of something else. I'm pretty positive, I'm confident that a lot of what I've said in past podcasts have been now trained into ChatGPT and is being reused in other forms of output. So the more that I keep talking about the same stuff, that training eventually is going to catch back up into the loop. The
It
problem
will.
with generative AI and the training process is even once it gets a hold of, we'll call it completely original thought, that transcript becomes trained and becomes part of the digression process.
It degrades over that piece of that whole entire period inside of there. And that this whole conversation is 100% why we ended up when we decided, okay, we're going to do our own podcast and we're going to do it as this and we're going to do it unedited, is because I think people are looking for real.
Yeah.
Because inside of the world of marketing, you had a ton of people that just started, it was always about content was king. ChatGPT came out and content marketers, they ruin everything when something comes out and they just do it. They just blasted the internet with tons of content. That's why you see Google making the changes it's made to its algorithm. Bing made changes. You have voice search that came out. You have people searching by AI. You have all these changes. But people are still searching, and you can stand out and connect better now by being a real person. And you can't get that off of any AI, even the AI scripts of the writing or the AI videos. Have you ever done the AI video of yourself
Yeah.
just to see what it would do? I mean, I can tell the difference right away because it starts highlighting things inside of my conversation that I would never highlight, and then leaves the stuff I think are important. It's kind of like ums and ahs and all that stuff inside of anything when you're talking. That's part of real language. You shouldn't cut that out of all of your video stuff because, in my opinion, because that's what makes it real. There's times I pause for a reason to pause. I mean, that's the whole piece that's inside of there. So, I mean, AI's came in, it's done a lot of stuff to them. It's done a lot of good things, but it's also hurt a lot of things. And with these new chips coming out from Apple or from Google and from Microsoft, I mean, that's only going to intensify the problem.
Yeah. And, a different way to look at this, and it's actually kind of a fascinating conversation to have with somebody. I did an interview with somebody in my book, and we were going through this process of how they use AI to help better understand their client. And so they feed in information that they find online, LinkedIn, off of their website, so that you can get a better understanding of what that business does, do some analysis, record. We've all seen now like sort of these recording mechanisms for calls like this, Zoom, and then it outputs with a transcript. And so they take all this information, research data, they put it into an AI, and it outputs basically some sort of strategic plan for how to support that particular client. And the interviewer was saying basically of how wonderful this is and how much it helps streamline and how much more accurate and follow-ups, and it really helps with improving the relationship with the customer. And I asked a pretty simple question. I said, do you share that you're doing this through AI with your customer? And they said, no. And I said, what do you think they would say if they found out that this is how you were managing them. And they said, I don't think they would be happy.
Correct.
And it just goes to show you that, we are imposing AI basically onto our customer base without even really considering what they think about that, or if they even want to, which is then you potentially are alienating, your customer in the process. There's this trust factor. It's more than just the authenticity of the relationship, but there's this trust factor, and there's a belief that, hey, if you're using AI to manage me, then we don't really have a relationship. It's all been faked. It's not sincere. And I don't think too many people are thinking about that. Like, what happens if they find out? Well, they should just
Yeah.
get over it, because everybody's using AI, and if you're not using AI, then you're going to be left in the dust type of philosophy. You're going to be left in the dust if you lose all of your customers.
You would be. I saw something really interesting, or it was a conversation. I was on a podcast yesterday, and they were talking about it. And they're a web agency, and what they do is their process is a little bit different than what I've seen. And I'm on the fence if I like it or if I hate it or if I love it. I've got all kinds of mixed emotions about it. But what they do is they say, okay, we're going to use AI to be able to generate all of your content for your website. So they have this whole system. They put it inside. They go through and they put it in. They use the same tool we use when we do website design. They do the markup tool. They then get the feedback from their client on the website. And then they follow that up with, then after they get that feedback back on it, they then send their wordsmith or their content writer into it. And that gives them the starting point to know they like this, they don't like this, and then it lets them take it and make it real afterwards. And I was like, that's kind of an interesting process to the whole piece. But you're saying, hey, guess what? This is our process. We're using AI because it speeds our process up, and we see we're getting better results out of the end product by doing it this way, and it saves us money because it reduces our research time. Now, that's the part that I'm kind of like, I kind of like that in a way. What's your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, so one, if they are advertising and communicating up front that we use AI to accelerate the initial step, and then we will go through it manually together. If that is communicated up front and understood, then I don't have a problem with it, right? That's great. That's your business model,
Right.
and as long as the consumer understands that that's the process and they buy into it because they understand that's the process, then great, have at it. No worries. But if you're hiding that, if you're just like, hey,
oh yeah,
we're going to bill you 10 hours for this initial research, and it only took us like 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back with, and that's all been hidden, then that's fine. Or that's not fine, but
come on, lawyers have been doing that for years.
Yeah, that's true. The consultants have been doing it. So true.
We already have that contract over here, but I'm a big the same hours I did for them.
But I also think that the consumer, or the business that is looking for this service, they also have to start asking those questions. Like, do I want somebody who actually knows what they're doing, or do I want somebody who's going to rely on AI to do the work? And there is a question there. I could argue that you're a marketing agency that actually doesn't know how to market because you're relying on AI for all of your ideas, which again aren't original or anything else. And that is being masqueraded as something that is original. Like, here is original content based on your profile for your website, but it's not. It's not. And so that has to always be the starting point. The problem is that most businesses and people who are looking for this kind of content are unaware of that. They are focused on the hype of AI, and they're like, oh, you're using AI to help accelerate this process. That sounds really cool. Okay, I'll do it. And they're not really considering the potential risk. I mean, there is absolutely positively a risk that the output for the initial would generate some sort of catchphrase or slogan that you would put up on the top of your web page, only to find out that that is copyrighted already, or trademarked. And so it's more than just saying, we're going to do this process to output something faster, and then we will manually go through it and fine tune it for you. There is legal concerns, there is risk concerns, there is authenticity concerns. All of those issues are not going to be solved the moment you introduce AI into the equation.
Yeah, and that's why you can't solely rely. That's why you can't solely rely on AI for anything. And what I like to do inside of the AI piece, and this was my thought when you were talking on this, is I like to take AI. So I like to take AI, and if I'm using it for, I use it a ton for writer's block, and to be able to expand on my idea, improve grammar, and take my content and do it. I think it's a great tool for it. But what I love to do when I'm doing research is I love to have, we subscribe, I think, to 5 to 10 different AI different tools. I love to take it from one into the other and say, do you agree with this?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you agree with this? Because then it gets my brain going and going, okay, well, we can go this direction. Now you can add that in, but you have to have that experience to be able to bring back. Dean, would you say that's kind of inside that process?
You actually went down the road I was going to go, so I agree with you a lot on that.
I was going to say, because you and I have
I
talked about this in depth a lot.
Right. So one of the things, Chris, and Rob was talking about writer's block, we work with a lot of small business owners that are really good at their craft and their things. And they, for you, if you meet them in person, they talk about their business forever and ever. You ask them to write something, they like, where do I go? So that's what Rob was saying. We use it for writer's block a little bit. Here, you put this in, get yourself started. Think about it, and then put it in your words and talk about your business, your situation. So again, we kind of use the hybrid approach with the AI. We use it to help us get started, but we don't depend. The final results aren't always good, and I think that's what you're saying as well.
Yeah, I love the idea of basically taking, and I've done this as well, but taking the response from one AI, putting it into another AI, and asking if it agrees. The problem also that people don't really understand is that AI is your biggest fan. Like I've brainstormed in ChatGPT as well, as an example, and I've said, I'm trying to brainstorm an idea for a new story, and here's my ideas, and it comes back, and it will, and I'll say, can we make this adjustment? And the other day it came back and it said, this is the most fascinating story I've ever heard.
We had that happen yesterday.
I'm like, well, that's not possible like that. Okay, I know, I equate ChatGPT now as to, like, it's my mom. Like, my mom loves all of my ideas. And so ChatGPT will love all of your ideas. And so even if you come up with these things and you're like, well, let's grade it, I get an A all the time.
Right.
And so there's some fine tuning in here for us to understand. Not only will it often agree with you, it rarely will disagree with you unless you purposely say, provide me a disagreement. But even if you try to be philosophical with generative AI in the context of something like, one of the biggest arguments that I have online right now is about autonomy, where autonomous AI actually doesn't exist. And there's plenty of people out there that talk about autonomous AI, but it doesn't exist. But if you were to go into like ChatGPT and you would say, provide me with a definition of agentic AI, the output is fairly defined by definition. It's an autonomy of basic processes. But then when I say something like, but autonomy doesn't exist in AI, it says, oh, you're right. And then it provides me. It is not necessarily providing me with a pushback on the conversation for true in-depth logical debate. It is basically responding in a positive manner based on what I say to get the response from that kind of debate that I'm looking for. And there's a big difference between having a conversation with somebody who disagrees with you versus having a conversation in ChatGPT that is designed to basically provide you with the response that you want to hear.
So something that really along that line, I screwed up Rob's chat GPT one time because my brain and the way I think is way different than the way he thinks. And he put in, I'm very analytical. I'm very much into analogies, and I like to read a lot of things. And I did this analogy based on a Mad Hatter's Tea Party from Lewis Carroll, and Rob put it into his GPT. I screwed his GPT up so bad because my thought process didn't align with his at all, and it didn't know which way to go. And if you've ever done that to somebody or done that to yourself, it's an interesting experiment. But it goes to show you that his GPT was learning from him, mine learns from me, and you're absolutely right. It's your own best fan, so you got to be really careful on that process as you're doing things.
Yeah,
Well,
there's been a couple of these viral things that have gone around recently, like ask ChatGPT, tell me 5 things that you know about me, and it returns 5 things it knows about, and everybody's like, this is incredible. Well, no, it just you've been talking to it for the last 5 months, so it's just reciting what it knows about you.
right. And
But
it
those
remembers
kind
that,
of
even though it says inside of the terms it doesn't remember a conversation, it does remember a conversation.
yeah.
And the big thing is, so there was a time, Dean, do you remember how long ago it was when I decided we were gonna, because we've run multiple different companies as well, and we don't put all of our eggs in one basket ever, and we do the same thing you do, Chris. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna take Chat GPT. It was Bard at the time before they brought out Gemini, so it was Bard, and then I took one other AI, I think, into the mix. And I said, I want you to create a business that's 100% created by just the two of you. And I want the AI to create the entire business. I want the business model. I want all that. So my whole venture capital side came in. I inputted all this information and I left it. A couple days later, I came back to it and it's talking to one another. It changed the language in which it was talking to each other. Next thing you know, it's going into binary code and talking in binary code. And I'm sitting and I'm looking at it and it's having an argument back and forth between the two of them. And I was like, that's a little too odd. I don't like that. And I ended up killing the whole program because I'm like, that just freaked me out to a whole new level. Have you ever tried anything like that with AI so far?
So about 7 years ago, roughly, as Google was building their initial frameworks around AI and deep learning, they had an experiment with 2 AIs, basically having a conversation inside of a controlled space, and they did the same thing. They basically started to create and invent their own language so that they can go back and forth and accelerate how they were, communicating. Um, and at that time, Google basically shut it down and they said, well, this is kind of scary. We can't have this. And they tried to start putting in obviously some governance and controls to prevent that from happening in the future. But now even you're actually the second person who have said something similar in the last couple of days. I watched a video online literally yesterday that actually had 2 AIs chatting with each other, and they basically started to formulate and they recorded this in real time, because naturally that's what they're going to do. Like they say, oh, you're an AI assistant, I'm an AI assistant as well. And so yeah, I think that's naturally a part of the challenge in terms of creating stable AI that won't do that, because they're ultimately trained to find optimization paths. And communication, for all of its glory, is actually one of the flaws of like you said, the ums make it real. And when those are removed and we could say things with, telepathically with our thoughts, then, yeah, then we can reduce a lot of how we misinterpret or understand each other. And so, yeah, communication is what makes us human. And even though we might want the AI to be able to adapt and to, understand us and communicate with us, at the end of the day, there's a lot of flaws with that as well.
So one of the things you were talking about, sanctioned, beings, if you will, AI, and I'm starting to see people trying to humanize the AI process instead of calling it a search engine. They're calling it or listings agent or whatever you want to call it. They're calling them agents versus engines. What's your thought? I mean, are you seeing a
I was
trend
just going to
across
go
that?
there, Dean. because
What's
we
that?
talked about that in depth yesterday.
I know we did because we're seeing the trends out there, and the problem is humanizing AI is okay to a point, but you don't want to, like you said, the trust factor misleading. Is it really truly a person, or is it a tool? And that's where people, I think a lot of agencies and people out there are starting to muddy the waters, if you will, on that whole process. Is it a real person, or is it really a tool that you're using to help you? What's your thought on that humanization? I mean, that's philosophical as hell, but it's really we're starting to see things go.
And I'm going to add one more thing into that. So the whole conversation yesterday, Dean, came in to the whole fact that I think it was, and don't quote me on this, I think it was Microsoft's CEO made the comment that SaaS is going to be dead, which is software as a service for anybody that doesn't know what that is. And agents are going to replace it. And I'm like, agents? That's just bringing that human factor. So, Chris, I'm really kind of curious, but that's where that conversation originally started.
Oh man, we could probably have an entire podcast just about this one topic. So
Yes.
let's break this down into a couple of different parts. The first one would be, why do you think Microsoft would say SaaS is dead and agents are the thing of the future? And I'll also add to that, I had a conversation. I'll kind of jump to it. I had a conversation with somebody several weeks ago, maybe a month ago, on LinkedIn that we're talking about agents, and I basically said, well, they're wrong, right? The article is wrong. And they said, are you telling me that all of the top capital venture companies, all of the corporations like Microsoft and Google, all of these entities are wrong? And I said, yes. I said, the
It's
question
propaganda.
is not whether, the question is not whether or not they're right or wrong. The question you have to ask is, why would they be promoting it? And that is what we have to think about is oftentimes when we hear Microsoft promoting something, or Google promoting something, or A16Z promoting something as being the next thing, it's because they have a stake in it. It's because they are actually trying to sell it. This is what the hype cycle creates. And they're hoping that there's enough people out there, as businesses and people, that are stupid enough to believe it. Okay. So are agents then going to be the thing of the future? First, here's a reality check for everybody. Agents have been around for 20 years. Chatbots have been around for 20 years.
Yep.
Agents is just the new term for chatbots. And all of this are still glorified search engines. They are assigned a task, they go out and perform that task, and they return a result.
Which is no different than going back to the 90s and looking at Lycos or Alta Vista.
Absolutely. So will agents continue to grow and modify and become more? Yes, absolutely. But their end result is still ultimately a service or a system that helps to accelerate a process in a convenient way. And maybe it has some sort of personality that can help you along that process. You know what the best example of an agent is your Alexa or Google Home device, which is also nothing more than a search engine. You say,
right.
I don't know if anybody has Google, like, okay, Google, turn on my thermostat for me.
I have Alexas on my side, but
yeah. So, hey, Alexa, buy Infallible for me. Put it in my shopping cart.
And she's wrong a lot of times.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, she told me today was going to be 90 degrees inside of Greeley, Colorado.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, my 9-year-old came out, and I'm like, why are you in shorts? Today's only 52. She goes, well, Alexa said it was going to be 92. And I'm like, no, it's not going to be 92 here. And it's not going to be. And it goes to the whole piece of, we do a ton inside of the voice search for the listings, for how all that stuff all comes together for us. So voice search is a huge piece in that registration. And a lot of people come back and go, well, I'm not being found inside of Alexa. And I'm like, Alexa's still at the baby stages of this whole thing. Yeah. It's still at the very beginning. But you have to remember, this is all just old technology, just with new names. Yeah. Which, I mean, you also have to remember when the CEO says something or anybody says anything, any of these large corporations, and I agree with you on that, it is no different than back in the venture capital world when you'd hire someone to make a comment about something out there because you wanted to pump a stock up and get it to be at a high level before you went in and dumped it.
Yeah.
And it becomes that whole entire legal battle of what's right, what's wrong, how's the SEC going to look at it and all that stuff. But they're promoting themselves, and it's all propaganda.
Yeah.
And AI has a ton of that because everybody wants to be the best of the best and buy my product.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's come back to that with I mentioned it earlier with autonomy. I want to touch on autonomy with you, but I also want to just quickly touch on the human element of this. There are key core humanistic capabilities, behaviors that AI will never be able to replicate. Empathy is one of those. It's a uniquely human trait that no AI on the planet will ever be able to replicate. It will have the understanding of what empathy is. It will be able to portray questions back to consumers in an empathetic manner, but it can't be empathetic. It's a machine. It doesn't have the capabilities of that. So when we look specifically at behaviors within AI, listening, right? Like I actually wrote an entire section of my book about AI and do you hear me? Well, purely from a technical perspective, I can turn on like Alexa and I can ask it something and it hears what I'm asking it and it interprets it. But when we say, can you hear me? Do you hear me? Are you listening to me? Like we've all been in relationships and, the other partner says, stop, put down the remote. You're not listening to me. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? Right. And those emotional states about actually honing in and listening to somebody, that is uniquely human. No AI is ever going to be able to replicate that. They're going to hear what you're asking for, interpret that into a set of directions, and then execute that set of directions based on what it's been programmed to do, which takes us then to autonomy, which the most overused phrase in AI right now, overly hyped propaganda, is autonomous AI. It does not exist.
No.
There is no such thing as autonomous AI. It is a marketing term that is designed to build some sort of favorability with whatever it is so that you buy it. And so even when we start thinking about things like agentic AI, most people have no clue what agentic AI actually is. Agentic stands for agency, not agent, which everybody puts it into the sentence of agentic AI means your agents are going to be able to do this. It has nothing to do with agents. That's the first problem. It deals with agency. Agency is a human characteristic of autonomy, and there's no autonomous AI. So thus we actually don't have agentic AI yet. And it's not until you break this stuff down do people say, well, I didn't think about it like that. Like you're just going along with the hype. And every single person out there that has agentic AI expert, you are lying to pretty much everybody on your network. And this is what's so, I get very frustrated every time I log into LinkedIn and I'm reading this stuff. Because it just all gets narrated back into the overly hyped ideology of what AI has become today.
Well, it goes into the whole piece. So I got contacted. This has probably been about 3 months ago by a venture capital group. And they said, we want you to do an analysis on what your opinion of this new software is going to be. And the whole entire point of the whole software, and the company already failed and already blew up and doesn't exist anymore. So I could talk about it. I don't have any NDAs inside of it. But the whole entire point to the whole thing was you could take your wife's text message, put it inside of the system, and it would come back with a better response than what you would come back as. And they're like, what do you think of it? And I said, well, it's probably going to polish that up really nice. But when the man is having a conversation with their spouse, they're really going to fuck that up. And I went, well, what do you mean? I said, because they're not going to sound anything like that. And she's going to know it didn't come from them. They can't understand those feelings. And it's going to cause more divorces than what it's going to prevent divorces out there.
there's really, if you think about it, there's no different than what we call predictive text inside of our text messages today or inside of like LinkedIn.
Yep.
Like it's, how about if you reply with this and it's like press the button and an instant reply. So I don't have to really think, so it's like however many times I get an invite and somebody says, thanks for connecting. And I put likewise, because likewise seems to be the number one response in LinkedIn for responding automatically to, whoever you're talking to.
And we've all
Now,
been guilty of hitting the button because
yeah,
it's easier to hit the button.
exactly. So, on some level you can argue convenience, but on other levels, it's just, like take a moment and actually say, hey, cool, thanks, something else.
Well, I mean, so we use Intercom for all of our different communications and our support and all of that. And they sell the whole entire agent piece. And we get contacted all the time about, do you do agents inside of the website? No, because I don't think they can sell like you and they don't sound like you. You come in, you have a conversation inside of our chat. It's Dean or myself. Now, I might tell you, I am getting back to you, but I'm currently in my kitchen making dinner. And this is what you're going to get because that's real. An agent's never going to have that. And there's different ways to be able to go out and about it. And I disagree with how much we're relying on AI today. It's a wonderful tool. I love it.
Yeah, I'll go back really quickly. We talked about setting up two artificial intelligence communicating with each other back and forth until they come up with, as of today, as far as I know, we don't have agents selling to other agents. We have agents selling to people, but more likely than not, we have humans selling to humans, right? And
now I want to take them and connect them together and say, tell me which one's better, and you guys have an argument about it and see what comes up.
Right. And negotiate a price for me, right? Like bargain this down. Like I don't want to pay $1,000, get it down to $500. And then they sit there and argue back and forth until what happens? At least I don't have to worry about it. I can sit out by the pool and let my agent do all the bidding for me. Like, maybe that's cool, but we're not in a world where we've got agents to agents selling and buying from each other.
No. And if you have a lot of things out there trying to go through and do it, but it does. I mean, it's one of those things to where they're pulling only from those pieces and not every answer is correct. And how does it feel to your customer when they come to your website and they get a response that is off the wall and doesn't make any sense? It's no different than calling up a company and it having the automated bot and it doesn't understand you. Next thing you know, you're screaming at the phone because it does not understand you. And you did not say what it thinks you just said.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's never worked. It's never been 100%. And that, I mean, when did that all come out for automated bots that were on phones and for the teleprompts? Probably 10, 15 years ago, if not longer?
30 years ago.
Was it 30 years ago for
30
that?
years or more. Yeah. Automated phone systems have been around, probably 40 years.
Oh, you mean as far as
I guess it
kind of lets you do your own process. But now what I think what Rob's saying is it's trying to interpret and make the decision for you on where you need to go.
I mean, it was a little bit more rudimentary back then, but I worked at a movie theater and there's a great Seinfeld episode on this. For those people who remember, there was a service called Movie Phone, which was purchased by AOL.
Up and told you all the times of the movies.
Right. And you would call in, it would say, tell me the name of the movie that you would like to call. Press 1 for Back to the Future. Press 2 for Star Trek, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And when I worked at the movie theater, we had a system basically similar. You would call the movie theater and it would say, press 1 for this movie, press 2 for this movie to get the show times. And I would record the audio and literally I would have to record it in that way. Like I would record each of the movie names. I would record each of the movie. And then the system would basically say, okay, this is assigned to the 1. This is assigned to the 2. This is assigned to the 3. Obviously, we've advanced a little bit more, but the general principle of automating that process, within some sort of agent type of environment, that has been around for so long, and now it's powered by AI.
It is. I mean, if I think about it, so I guess that did exist. So when I worked for AOL and for Prodigy and CompuServe and HP back in the day, I was telling someone this the other day, it wasn't until the very end of my whole entire spill with all that tech support was free. You used to have to pay to get to me. Not only were you paying for the phone call, which, you dial 10, 10, 220 and all those different numbers that were back in the day for before you made the phone call for long distance, but we used to be not as connected as we were. And you had to pay to be able to get to somebody and have a conversation. And half the time they still couldn't solve the problem. But I mean, the world it repeats itself, and the AI has been reboxed and repositioned so it can sell more stuff.
Yeah.
Is all it's came down to. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, we could even pick on Elon Musk. We could say, electric cars weren't a new thing. He just brought them back.
Yeah.
There was electric cars before.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, they're not autonomous cars. They're marketed as autonomous cars, but they're not autonomous cars. Again, this is one of these conversations that I love having with people. Like, well, why do they call it autonomous cars if they're not autonomous? It's all marketing. And here's
propaganda.
how you know they're not autonomous. Because when your car runs out of electricity, it doesn't decide on its own to drive to the local filler up station and pay for and recharge itself.
I love it.
It asks you, hey, I'm out of battery, or it gives you a warning and you have to input, yeah, let's go over to, the charging station. That is the definition of autonomy. Autonomy is not, well, it can make a left and right turn when it knows where to go. Yeah, because it knows where to go. That's reprogrammed. That, again, you just further proved it's not autonomous.
Well, let's talk about George Jetson. He had to go in. He had to push the button every day.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I'm still pressing the button.
I mean, it still took him to go in and press that button. And my goodness, that finger hurt. Rosie had to still be turned on every day.
Yeah, and recharged and whatever.
Right, and she had to be taken to the shop to get fixed. I mean, so everything is inside of that area. But I mean, this is a conversation that I've really enjoyed having with you, Chris, because I think there's a lot of stuff that's inside of this whole piece of AI. I think it's an absolute great tool to be able to use it, but using it in the right way, because it's not about being able to put everything out there. And the one thing we didn't touch on is you have to make sure that you're inside of the natural language piece. So if you're using it, you have to make sure that you're getting natural language, because that's how Google, that's how Bing, that's how all the search engines are now looking for real content. Is it like a conversation? Is it natural language? Yeah. And I think that's a huge piece. I want to end on that. Have you done any research inside of natural language at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. We have to think about this in terms of how, again, we communicate. And I think the more that you can build your website and build prompts and build language that is more natural within your structure, that is all going to be more beneficial for you in terms of SEO. It also is going to be beneficial in terms of, you mentioned earlier, it's like, how do I get my website into Alexa? That's all going to come from natural language and automating that process to be a little bit more realistic in both your structure of the site, as well as in all of your marketing efforts, your advertising, your videos, your collateral. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, we talked about it as basically being like a tree. This was a big conversation we had yesterday. It hasn't published out yet, but your market is nothing but a tree. So you have your listings engine. That's where we go out to 800 plus networks inside of that area. That's your foundation. Your tree trunk ends up being your website, because it's a huge data piece. You have your schema that's inside of there. You have all of your connections, and then everything else is all branches. So, you have your big branch for social media. Off of that, you have, Facebook, all the different networks, because it's about everything. Because everything at the end of the day, especially with AI, everything comes in and connects with each other. And certain pieces talk, just because they're different companies or different products or different AIs out there, if you want to look at it that way, they still talk and they reference those points to be able to pick and choose to make sure you have consistency of that data and that the data it's delivering is real. Because at the end of the day, when you do a search to any search engine, no matter if it's voice search, if it's AI search, if it's Google, Bing, any of them, it wants to deliver the best result it can to you because it wants you to come back and keep using it, because that's how they sell a subscription or make ad dollars to it. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you continue with the tree analogy and you say your competitors are other trees within that forest, you're still creating an ecosystem. And one of the things
Yep.
that I often talk about is that you have to also find ways that you can collaborate with your greatest competitors, because as part of that ecosystem, if you can bridge the gap between those trees and you can touch branches in some way, then you are actually going to be more successful in the long run. Don't look at your competitors as they're my competitors and I want to steer away from them. Look at it as how you can actually balance your natural language and all of the things that you're talking about with those competitors so that you can bridge that gap and actually be more successful.
Well, I love that analogy. I never really thought about competitors having other trees inside of the forest. I'm surprised you and I didn't go there yesterday, Dean.
We were too busy doing other things.
But it was one of those things to where it's all organic. I came up with the tree concept because everything starts off organic, and then you have to add on to it because that's how data structures everything out, which I think is an amazing concept. But yes, everything is connected. And speaking of competition, I love competitors. If we didn't have competitors, you wouldn't have business. So, and if you go into a business that has no competition, you're probably not going to make it very far.
Yep.
Unless you really came up with something brilliant and
or you
you're going
discover
to have
something nobody
competitors
else
soon.
discovered yet, and they're going to go, oh, I see there's a need there, and they're going to come and fill that market with you. I mean, that's part of our society that we're in. So, but Chris, I have a question for you in your book. Is it in audible form yet, or is it just in print form?
It's not yet. I might just hire an AI agent to.
I was going to say, you can get an AI to read it for you.
Yeah, just to read it all. I actually have. I've cloned my voice in 11 Labs. If you're not familiar with that service, but 11 Labs,
Yeah.
I've cloned my voice, so I could just use my voice and record the entire book and put it out there. But yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so we went full circle on the AI.
Yeah,
piece, you know?
yeah.
Now the question is, would it get the right tones of your voice? Because everyone, when I used 11 apps, it doesn't. It reads like I'm talking like this, and I'm going to go through, and then I'll heighten my voice up. I'm like, I'm too all over the place. I can't. It doesn't get me.
Yeah, my clone gets about 90%. The other 10%, I recognize, but somebody who doesn't know who I am, they would be listening and they wouldn't really be able to tell. There's only certain, times where, you end a sentence with a question, and when it's not a question, and then you're like, wait a second, this is not real. So,
and you said the best place to find you is at chrishood.com. And then they can find your book and everything from there as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can reach out to me, chrishood.com, CHRISHOOD.com. You can find my social media, my blog, all of my books. Everything is pretty easy to get from there, chrishood.com.
Perfect. And did you have any questions or anything you wanted to bring up that we haven't talked about so far?
No, we covered a lot.
Yeah, we did.
No, I mean, sure. There's a ton of other stuff that we could cover. I mean, I got, if I was going to reverse this and start asking you guys questions, yeah, man, we could. Really
I'd be game for that anytime. You just let us know when you want to come back, and we'll have a whole podcast on that.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot of different types of elements of marketing, and where we're at with AI, but just with real, genuine, authentic marketing. There's tons of stuff that I'm sure we could have gotten into.
Oh, there is. And I mean, we've seen, I say this all the time, we're seeing things change and more things come out so fast. It reminds me of going from the 14.4 modems, actually the 9600 bot modems, up to the 56K. Then all of a sudden cable came out, and it was like, wow, everything's really super fast. So, I mean, and if you're a business owner and you're not keeping up on it, you're going to be left behind really fast if your competition is.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Chris, and I'd love to have you back at any point in time. Dean, is there anything else you want to finish up
I
with?
just want to say thanks, Chris. Very insightful, and I really appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Have a good day.